You listen what you want to listen, not what is being said.
Bonjour seekers, life mentors, life masters. Welcome to Life Masters Club. Today is Wednesday, 19th of April, 2023. And this coming weekend, it will be the end of Ramadan for Muslims. Tomorrow, it will be a solar eclipse for the world. And in a couple of days, it will be my youngest son's birthday. I was reading a passage from this book by Osho on joy, subtitled The Happiness That Comes From Within. It's very interesting. In particular, this passage, which I will read to you quickly. From the surface to the center. Gautam Buddha has said, there is pleasure and there is bliss. Forego the first to possess the second. And then Osho continues, meditate over it as deeply as possible because it contains one of the most fundamental truths. These four words will have to be understood, pondered over. The first is pleasure, the second happiness, the third is joy, and the fourth is bliss. Pleasure is physical, physiological. Pleasure is the most superficial thing in life. And then he goes on. And basically, so he took Buddha's saying, there's pleasure and there's bliss, forego the first to possess the second. Don't forget, this Buddha quote is about 2,500 years old. And in those days, the idea was to embody fully third density. And there was still a very strong attachment to duality. So it made sense to simplify something more complex into a dual choice. There is pleasure, which is superficial, and there is bliss, which is of the spirit. And if you want to attain the second, you have to forego the first. So it was presented as a dual choice. And we should not forget that probably the Buddha's sayings were more complex, and they were then transcribed by the monks, Buddhist monks who followed Buddha and who themselves may or may not be enlightened. So they would have simplified, maybe oversimplified the teachings or the explanations or the realizations of their master. Osho, who wanted to give a more nuanced and more detailed and a more complex message, but more importantly, Osho, who was recorded with videos and stuff, could afford to be more detailed because there was less risk of the nuance and the complexity being lost in translation, since his discourse was recorded. So instead of keeping it a dual, he made it into a more complex four-pronged thing, which I suspect he wanted to link, even though it's not, apparently I've not finished the book, but he didn't go that way in the next paragraph, but I suspect he had in mind the four states of consciousness. So the waking state, the dream state, the deep sleep state, and the fourth state. So let's go through these four states of consciousness and associate them with those four words that Osho is recommending we meditate upon in his book. So the identification with the body makes you seek pleasure and try to avoid pain, but not realizing that they are both just different time and intensity of the same thing. And if you are not masterful, you will hurt yourself instead of pleasing yourself. And if you are masterful, then you will realize that it is extremely limited and it is incapable of providing you lasting satisfaction. If you identify with your mind, you will seek happiness and possibly pleasure too, but happiness which is based on stories that you tell yourself and then you believe or don't believe in it. If it's a positive story, when you don't believe in it, you are sad. When you believe in it, you are happy. If it's a negative story, it's the other way around. But it's still also, if you are not master of your thoughts, you will not be able to generate reliably any satisfaction. And if you are master of your thoughts, you will realize quickly that it's very limited. So the third state of consciousness is the deep sleep, which, by the way, it is possible to remain conscious in that state. We will come to it later. So deep sleep would correspond to the word joy, and it corresponds to the soul, to the identification to the soul, which means if you see yourself as a soul being incarnated in a temporary body and living a finite life, but surviving, being transcendent to that, you can experience joy. And how do you do that? It's by simply staying in the present and staying in the identification with the soul. And then you see that any pleasure or happiness of the incarnated being is temporary. And therefore, if it's a moment of pleasure or a moment of happiness, you enjoy it, but knowing it won't last, so you enjoy it fully because you know it's not going to last so long, so let's enjoy it while it lasts. And then when there is a moment of pain or suffering, you will not necessarily try to avoid it immediately, because at least you know it's temporary. So if you dislike it, you just basically bite the bullet, and if you like it, you enjoy it while it lasts. And that can give you, after a while, really a sense of joy, which is a form of love that is impersonal, that radiates in all directions rather than just in one direction. At the beginning, it will give you love for yourself, love for others, compassion, a bit of compassion, at least some empathy. But also it gives you a bit of wisdom, because when it's pleasure or when it's pain or when it's happiness or unhappiness, you know it's temporary and you experience it with interest for the little while it lasts. So this is joy and identification with soul. But the most elusive and difficult to catch, because in fact you can't catch it, you can't be it. The fourth state of consciousness is what happens when you are not there, when you are not identified with the body, you are not identified with the mind, you are not identified even with the soul. That's when you are not there anymore, you are pure consciousness, and that's what can be associated with the word bliss. It's not even that you perceive or not perceive pleasure or pain or happiness or joy. They can happen, but you don't even feel necessarily as it's happening to you as an individuation. It's happening in the whole concert of life. So life is happening in the universe. It's a magnificent concert. There is some pleasure and pain and sensations. You don't see pleasure and pain anymore. You see sensations happening in the universe. You don't see happiness or unhappiness happening in the universe. You see just stories unfolding. In fact, you see the universe unfolding, life unfolding, and you see the mind telling stories about it and enjoying it or not enjoying it. And finally, you also observe your soul observing that. So you become an observer of the observer. But the observer of the observer is not identified in any way. So this is the fourth state of consciousness. This is bliss. This is nirvana, samadhi, the kingdom of heaven, jnana or jhana, as they say. So this is what is referred to. This is what most people pursue, but missing the key, that you cannot pursue it as an individuation. You cannot pursue it as a body. You cannot pursue it as a mind. You cannot even pursue it as a soul. To reach that fourth state of consciousness, you have to be no more. So this is what I wanted to tell you today. Originally, I wanted to do a video on the Trinity, but I noticed when reading that book that it's in the context of an even bigger epistemology of how throughout history mankind has been segregating different states of consciousness. And we can cut it in two, in a dual view of the universe. We can cut it in three, in a Trinity view. We can cut it in four. We can cut it in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe more. But it's still, in the end, for those who have had an epiphany in meditation, in the end, it's the oneness of the universe that is the common experience of most, if not all, enlightened souls. That's what is described in most religious, spiritual, and even some philosophical scriptures. So thank you. I'm saying namaste, sayonara, bye-bye, hasta la vista, au revoir, ciao.